Hi, Filmatics. Thanks for coming back to part 2 with Stan Weisleder. Stan, did I do it? Did I say it right? Stan?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so everyone probably knows by now I'm dyslexic.
Here.
So it's Stan Weisleder. I'm so excited to say it right because my last name is Aber, and I turned it to Sir Herbert Sneakies for my children's book. So I wanted to give Stan the grace of saying his last name correctly, Weisleder. And what a leader he is. The oldest sheriff graduate from Los Angeles County, right? Because your dream to be a policeman, you actually made that happen when you retired from being an actuary. And then you retired.
Yes.
And you wanted to become a policeman. Most people play cops and robbers and all that stuff when we were playing in our backyard or Gilligan's Island or whatever we played. But when you retired being an actuary, your dream was to become a policeman. And the challenge was getting in shape. And so you really put your mind and the focus to training and passing the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. What do you call it? The Police Academy test? What's it called exactly?
It's a PAT, Physical Aptitude Test. PAT.
Yeah.
Pronounced PAT, Physical Aptitude Test.
And so you had to learn, you had to get over that. The biggest hurdle was that wall. And they always say in art,
6-foot wall almost did me in.
Oh wow! But you are such an you're like so inspirational that everyone's listening is like, okay, he was the oldest guy who ever graduated. He did it. That 6-foot wall. There's no excuses anymore. All things are possible. And because of people like you, it's so encouraging and inspiring to see people not letting things. They don't sit about complaining. That you actually just put your mind to it, did the work, got in shape, and overcame this obstacle, and you made it, and you did it.
Yeah, I did it. I remember I lost 25 pounds. I went to the gym, I think 6 days a week, and I was lean and mean at that time. I've put on most of that weight, has come back since, but it was a challenge, and it was something I really wanted to do, and I did it, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. There's such a thing called the freshman 10 when you go to college that you gain 10 pounds, but there's such a thing that's called the COVID 10 for everyone been eating and munching as we've been locked in our houses. So hopefully people are shedding those weight, and because it's good to stay healthy, a healthy weight. It really is. Because it's so easy to snack and munch when you're locked in a house and
tell me about it.
With the part, so many things closed, like basketball games, football games, like opera. But this one guest said that he's been watching a lot of opera online. There's been all these free operas and museums tours that you can do. And I go, wow. So there's been some good changes, like with Zooming, you can like watch opera online and stuff. But there's a missing element, I think, that like human interaction where you're in person. But I know that everyone's doing augmented reality and the reality and that 3D and the to be like augmented reality with those goggles, the like avatar world. But I think there's something about the human connection and seeing someone and being there with person, feeling their energy, feeling the just being around them. And so I just want to, just share. How did you get through COVID? Was it hard for you? Was it difficult? Were you writing?
Was I writing? Well, I was always writing, and I try to do it whenever I can. Sometimes I'll do something and just put it aside and forget about it, or maybe I'll come back to it later. And I try to use my time efficiently. Like, for instance, many times a writer will get stuck. It happens. You get stuck, okay? When I get stuck, I just put it aside and go to a different writing subject and wait till maybe I'll go back to the first one a week later or a month later or whatever. So I never stop writing completely when I get stuck. I'll just put that project aside and go to something else.
You are so disciplined. You are very, very disciplined, and your your work ethic and your skills, and just that you're able to accomplish things and just do the work, and don't be you just do the work, and it's so gratifying, and it's just inspirational to me right now that you're just doing the work. And well, we're doing part two because we have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to see if you would like to, talk to us how, the book that you wrote, you said it's the only one, right? The only book.
The only novel ever written about the black fighter pilots of World War II.
And it's called A Killer of Lions. So if you can share with us a little about that. It was the air that they had to fight two air forces in order to be recognized, right?
Well, they had to fight the German Luftwaffe, obviously, because they were the enemy. But at the same time, they had to put up with the ingrained prejudices of the American armies and the American Air Force. So on one hand, they were fighting real planes, and on the other hand, they were fighting their other officers who really just wanted to get them out of the way. They just didn't even want them around. And what happened was very curious. In 1944, well, let's go back a bit. Their first being when their squadron was put into effect was in April of 43. They went overseas, and they were stationed in North Africa, and they were escorting a bombing mission to Italy, and one of the men shot down a German plane. And they were so happy because to recognize a fighter group or a fighter squadron, you have to shoot down enemy planes. If you don't shoot down enemy planes, you're nobody. You just don't exist. So they thought that would be their new entree into getting the chance to fight the enemy and shoot down more German planes. But they didn't get that opportunity. They were shoved in the back. They were given crummy assignments, crappy assignments, and they were kept out of harm's way. Then later on in 1944, during the Battle of Anzio, American troops were getting clobbered by the Germans. They were really getting slaughtered. So they called in every available Air Corps unit in the Mediterranean, including the 99th Fighter Squadron, which were the black fighter pilots. So they were actually called into action at that point. And within the next couple of weeks, they shot down, I believe, about 17 German planes and damaged maybe about half as many. And so all of a sudden, they were given recognition where before they didn't have it. And then from that, they were giving new assignments like long-range bomber escort. And that's where they really shined. And at the same time, when that was happening, new black fighter pilot groups were being trained in the U.S., and Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who was their leader, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., graduated West Point in 1936. And he had to put up with 4 years of what they called the silent treatment at West Point. No one spoke to him unless he was giving a direct order. He had his own room because no one would bunk with him because he was black. When they went on maneuvers, he had his own tent. Nobody would want to be with him because he was black. Anyway, when he graduated West Point in 1936, he wanted to go into the flying end of military service. So he was part of the first class of black fighter pilots. They started out with, I believe, 13 men, and maybe 5 of them graduated after going through the year and a half of training. So he was made the commander of the first squadron. and he led them, and he was also responsible for the training of the additional 3 squadrons back in the U.S. So when he came back to Italy, he brought 3 new squadrons with him, and then they took all of the other black fighter pilots from the 99th Squadron, and they were all put into one fighter group, the 332nd Fighter Group, which consisted of 4 squadrons of black fighter pilots. Now, all fighter groups had only 3 squadrons. They had 4. And that's how they fought throughout the rest of the war. The largest fighter group of 4 squadrons instead of 3. And from there, they went to other adventures is probably not the right word. Let's say, let's say adventures. But in any event, when you talk about discrimination, they did not have to put up with discrimination from our allies. They did not have to put up with discrimination from the Germans, because there were about 24 that were shot down, and they were in German prison camps. They did not experience any of that discrimination and the usual things that they had to put up from the Americans. So the only ones that gave them a hard time were their own people. It was the Americans that gave them all of this aggravation regarding discrimination. They didn't get it from the Allies, and they didn't get it from the enemy, only their own people. And when it was time to go home, it was still like, get to the back of the bus, boy. That's how it was, and things really didn't start to change until late 40s, when President Harry Truman, he enforced integration. He said they passed the law. I don't remember the number of that particular law or provision, but that was when they first started to have no discrimination, and it came very slowly. The Air Force was probably but they were the first branch of the service to have no discrimination, because they had a lot of black officers in the Air Force. They didn't have many black officers in the Army or the Marines or the Navy. The Air Force did have a lot of black officers, because they were the first ones to have officers at all that were black. And it's funny how that came about, because no one wanted to be with them. So when they went through their training, it was all segregated. And how could they be segregated when they graduate? Well, the only way to maintain the segregation is to have them as fighter pilots. In other words, you're not a bomber, you're not with a crew, you're all by yourself. A fighter pilot is all by himself. So they were able to maintain the illusion of discrimination by having all of these men as fighter pilots. And they did a hell of a job, and it was because of that they got recognition. And then one thing led to another, to another, to another. And eventually, today, people don't even think about it. And people don't even know about that. During World War II, they had discrimination to a great extent directed towards these fighter pilots, officers, fighter pilots. And they had to put up with all of this crap, but they didn't have to put up with it from the Allies. The British did not have this prejudice. Whatever other, and the Germans, of course, you would think that the Germans would be discriminatory against them, but they were not. When they were shot down, like I said, there were about 24 of them. They were put into officers' quarters for the prisoners with the white. They were not segregated. So when a black fighter pilot was shot down, he went into a stalag where there were white fighter pilots, white officers. So there was no discrimination there. But once they came home, they had that discrimination all over again. And it wasn't fair, but that's how things were back at that time. It took the country a long time to get over it. In fact, they're probably still getting over it. And a lot of people to this day don't even know what these guys did during World War II. Their record was as good as any white unit during World War II, with the same number of planes shot down percentage-wise as the white groups. And at first, when the white pilots who were piloting the bombers were given the black fighter pilots as their escort, they complained. But after a while, they realized these guys are good. And then they would actually request that their escort be the black fighter pilots from either the 99th, the 100th, 301st, or 302nd Fighter Squadrons, which made up the 332nd Fighter Group, the only group with 4 squadrons of black fighter pilots. Now, why did I pick this story to write? Well, when I write, I try to pick out a story that no one did before. No one did it, okay? No one had done this. The only books that there were when I started this project were like textbooks, dry textbooks, which just gave facts. I wanted to write a human interest kind of story. So I had to do a lot of research. It took me about 10 years of research on this particular book, A Killer of Lions. About 10 years to research it and about 10 years to write it. It just took time because it was hard getting at the facts. Now, what made me interested in this? Well, when I was in Air Force ROTC, one of our instructors was a Tuskegee pilot. And he was the top ace of the black fighter pilots. He shot down 4.5 planes officially. He claims it was 5, but there's always an argument about that, because if you have 5 planes to your credit, you are designated as an ace. And his name was Lee Archer. Lee Archer, and I had a number of meetings with him because I knew he was the guy who went to all of their reunions, because he was the top guy. He shot down more German planes than anybody of the other black fighter pilots. And so I was one of his students. And when I told him about the book that I was writing, he said to me, "Well, why are you doing this?" I said, "Well, it's a story that has to be told. No one else has done it." So
that's Spielberg calling, and he says, we would like a movie deal with Stan Weisleder, because this it should be a docudrama movie, and I'm so touched when you're telling me this story, because it's hard to go into war, anyone going to war, but if there is this additional pressure and like or meanness, like what really is the word? Is it somebody being mean to someone, like making you an outcast just because you're different? So it's really, I mean, I'm just stunned and floored, and I'm just listening to you graciously to tell this beautiful story, and I'm so grateful that you're on the show telling this story, because it's heartbreaking, and just the things that people go through in life. A lot of us go through stuff in life, but sometimes we don't realize there's people that are going through things that we don't really even know how hard it is for them.
Yeah, let me add something to that story that people also are not aware of. Approximately 24 of these black fighter pilots were shot down and imprisoned, by the Germans. In addition to those 24, there were 2 more. One of them ended up with the Greek partisans, and the other one ended up with the Yugoslav partisans and actually fought with them until they were able to get sent back to their original unit. And I used that in my book, A Killer of Lions. Of course, I added a little to it and used some of my own imagination, but it happened. They had two guys. One fought with the Greek partisans for a few weeks or maybe a month or so, and then the other one with the Yugoslav partisans. And people don't know that. They have no clue what these guys did. And that's a story that I told. And like I said, when people ask me, why did you write about it? I said, well, because it's a story that has to be told. No one ever told it. And still to this day, no one has ever written a novel about these guys and about what they did.
And just I was listening to your story, and it's like I just hope that there's always good change, and I think that like these stories like this shines light on things, and it's just I just pray and hope that people will just be kind to people, be kind. If you can be kind, it's this, we're all different, like like you don't like your brother and sister, but don't like your neighbors, but if you can be kind, because kindness is a two-way street. And when you see these heartbreaking things where people are just so mean and bullying, or just because of just differences, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, people will be people. Will this ever change? I don't know, maybe in a few thousand years. I don't know, whatever. But when you think back in history, the human race has done such incredibly horrific things to people. I mean, it's bad enough now, but when you read history about somebody being drawn and quartered, boiled in oil, set afire on purpose, impaled, the horror, the things that people have done to people boggles the imagination. And today, you still have this horrific thing going on where people are beheaded, and you film it and you take a movie of it so you could show it to your friends and relatives and things like that. The horror that goes on is mind-boggling, is totally incomprehensible that people could be so mean and rotten to other people for no reason other than they just don't like them or don't agree with them. It's horrific. And when you look at it, how many of these things could be avoided? They could all be avoided. And then when you start to look at it in depth, at least for me anyway, it seems to me like most of these situations where people do vile things against or to other people, it's because of differences in religion somehow. It could be Catholics versus Protestants in Northern Ireland. It could be Muslims lashing out at Christians, and it could be everybody lashing out at Jews. It's just, I don't understand why people do that. And take a country like Germany. Germany did horrific things during World War II, yet they are so advanced and so civilized. How could an advanced, civilized society do such horrific things? And the same things with the Japanese people during World War II. They did more horrific things than the Germans did to prisoners. And people don't know this. A lot of it is hushed up. But if you do your research, you'll find out things, they'll blow your mind. So what does the writer write about? Well, you could write about those things, or you could write about something that maybe gives you a good feeling. And that's what I chose to do. Write about something that gives you a good feeling. And when I wrote A Killer of Lions, that gave me a good feeling because I knew that everything in that book was true. Everything happened. It's based on fact. It's using my word, faction. I think it's an important thing. Now, people say, well, it's been done. They did a movie about it. Well, yeah, they did an HBO movie about it. And then there was a movie called Red Tails. So what? If you take the story about, let me give you a good example. The shootout at the OK Corral. Do you know there were about 8 movies at the OK Corral? And that has really nothing to do with American history. Nothing. Just a bunch of dumb cowboys shooting it out one morning. Of course, one of them was very famous, Wyatt Earp and his buddy Doc Holliday. But so what? It had nothing to do with American history. Yet you talk about the black fighter pilots. That's an important part of American history. And, these guys were not athletes. They were not basketball players. They weren't rappers. These guys were fighter pilots and American heroes. That's what they were. Fighter pilots and American heroes. They never got the due recognition that they should have gotten then during World War II. Today, most people still don't know what they did or anything about them. Or they'll say, oh, yeah, I think I heard about that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a TV movie made about that a few years ago. That's all they know. Anyway, I don't want to go on that on and on. I don't want to bore you with that. So why don't you ask me a question instead of just letting me rant on and on?
You're so passionate and shining the light on heroes. And when someone's a hero and they're ordinary people that are extraordinary, or maybe they weren't ordinary because they were so skilled and did amazing things. So we're so happy that you are writing about the things that you love. And a little bit can we talk about The View from Over Here, your radio show?
Well, that's on a hiatus now because of the virus and so forth. And also we ran out of sponsors. So that's on hiatus now. And will it be coming back? We'll make a decision once we get past this virus business.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you so much for anyone serving our country. I appreciate anyone that serves the country. It's just something that you go into conditions that are, not fun. And it's like you have to have special skills and a camaraderie and a hierarchy and a rank. And it's so important that I think that people recognize the people that fought in our military that give their life of service, and anyone that is extraordinary in that field should get the recognition they deserve. And I just
tell me, where are you broadcasting from in LA?
Los Angeles, Hollywood area.
Okay, I've heard of Hollywood.
Yeah, And so where can people keep up with my new buddy, Stan Weisleder? Where can they keep up with you? Your website?
I don't have a website.
Okay, well, you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, right?
Well, if anybody wants to reach me or talk about any of my books, my email address is very simple. It's stan@infinityx.us.
Well, I hope that's okay, because sometimes you'll get some spammers. Well, thank you so much, Stan, for being on the show. And we had a little background noise. I don't know what that is, a toy, or is that a World War II plane taking off?
No, that's my phone ringing.
Really?
I have it on the motorcycle mode.
Yeah, and so you're bringing some humor to us. We're wrapping up with humor. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Stan. It's been a pleasure. If you want to support Stan or the podcast, give us 5 stars. We have in the summary how you can support the podcast and support Stan by buying one of his books. And
remember, The Dogs of Brownsville.
The Dogs of Brownsville. Yes.
There's never been a book like it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Stan, for coming on the show today.
All right. I thank you, Marilyn. Okay. And maybe one day we'll do it again in person.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening. So stay healthy and cheers to our listeners. You've made us a top hit already on the Apple rankings. I really appreciate it. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Okay, good night.